Karen Grassle and Michael Landon, two names forever tied to Little House on the Prairie. On screen, they were the perfect couple, raising a family through hardship, hope, and faith. But behind the camera, their relationship was far more complicated than fans ever imagined. For years, Karen stayed silent as the world celebrated Landon as television's most beloved father. She smiled in interviews, guarded her memories, and protected the image of a man she once admired deeply. Yet time has a way of uncovering what silence hides. And at 82, she finally decided the truth deserved its moment too. What really happened between them when the cameras stopped rolling? Why did she keep his secrets for nearly 50 years? And what did she finally reveal that changed how fans see both of them forever? When Little House on the Prairie first aired in 1974, it wasn't just another family drama. It became a cultural heartbeat, an American ideal of simplicity, morality, and hope. Viewers fell in love with the Ingalls family, led by Michael Landon's steadfast pa and Karen Grassle's nurturing ma. Together, they represented everything audiences wanted to believe about family and faith. But before the world saw them as pioneers on the frontier, Karen was simply a struggling actress from Berkeley, with dreams that seemed too far out of reach. She had studied Shakespeare, performed on stage, and imagined a quiet career in theater. Television wasn't her plan. When she auditioned for Little House, she had no idea that the man waiting behind the desk, Michael Landon, would change her life forever. Landon was already a household name. After Bonanza, his reputation in Hollywood was that of a genius, demanding, charismatic, and deeply involved in every frame of production. He wasn't just the star of Little House. He was its creator, writer, and guiding force. From the first day on set, Grassle admired his work ethic. He was funny, sharp, and often fatherly toward his cast. To her, he seemed like someone who genuinely cared about the story they were telling. The chemistry between them on screen was undeniable. Their scenes carried warmth and realism, and Landon encouraged her to bring emotional truth to every line. For a time, Grassle believed she had found not only a creative partner, but a mentor, a man who believed in her talent when others didn't. Their working relationship blossomed into a quiet, mutual respect that fueled some of the show's most touching moments. Yet even in those early days, there were signs that Landon's perfectionism came at a cost. He expected absolute commitment from his cast and crew, often working 14-hour days. Grassle noticed how tension could shift on set when things didn't meet his standards. Still, she told herself it was worth it. The success of Little House was undeniable, and she felt proud to play a role that families across America cherished. As the seasons went on, Landon's influence grew even stronger. Every creative decision, every rewrite, every emotional beat passed through him. The set revolved around his presence. For Grassle, that was both inspiring and intimidating. She saw the pressure he carried to maintain the show's image and ratings, but she also began to feel how that control left little room for anyone else's voice. Still, she kept quiet. She told herself he was under immense stress, that his intensity came from passion, and to the outside world, everything looked perfect. Landon's laughter echoed through interviews, and Grassle's gentle smile convinced fans that life on the prairie was just as wholesome off-screen as it appeared on television. But behind the smiles, something was beginning to shift. Grassle could sense subtle changes, moments when Landon's tone hardened, when small disagreements about dialogue or direction carried more weight than they should. The warmth that once defined their partnership started to cool. She couldn't pinpoint why, but the man she once saw as a mentor began to feel distant, almost defensive. It was the start of a fracture no one on set could see, hidden beneath the charm that made Landon beloved by millions. Karen didn't speak of it then, not to cast members, not to reporters. She believed silence was safer, that speaking out might destroy everything they had built. And for years, she kept that silence. But in time, that silence became its own burden. one that would follow her long after the show's final scene faded to black. As Little House on the Prairie grew into a phenomenon, the atmosphere on set began to shift. What once felt like a close-knit family now carried the weight of expectation. Ratings were strong, and audiences adored the wholesome image, but behind the scenes the strain was mounting, especially for Karen Grassle. Michael Landon had become the show's heartbeat and its ruler. He wrote scripts, directed episodes, and controlled production decisions. That authority brought excellence, but it also bred exhaustion. Grassle watched as his perfectionism hardened into dominance. Each episode was shaped by his vision, and though that vision built an empire, it left little space for others to breathe. Karen admired his creative brilliance. She never denied his talent, but she also began to see the other side, the man who demanded total control, who grew frustrated when others questioned his direction. On screen, he played the gentle patriarch who led with compassion. Off-screen, the pressure to maintain that image often made him distant, sharp, and unpredictable. The turning point came quietly. During contract renegotiations, Grassle learned that her salary was far below what male leads on comparable shows were earning. After years of carrying emotional depth in nearly every family scene, she believed she had earned the right to fair compensation. But when she approached Landon, someone she once saw as an ally, his response cut deep. Rather than advocate for her, he dismissed her request. The conversation left her shaken. In later interviews, she would describe that period as a kind of awakening. The man she had admired, the one she believed respected her work, suddenly seemed unwilling to see her as an equal. She didn't fight back publicly. There was no scandal, no angry headlines. Just a growing silence between two people who once carried the heart of a nation's favorite show. The tension began to show in small ways. His jokes at her expense, subtle digs during filming, moments that made her feel invisible. To the cast and crew it may have looked harmless, but to Karen it was painful. She came to work each day determined to keep her dignity intact, performing the role of Ma as if nothing was wrong. It wasn't just about money, it was about respect, and about the realization that Landon's charm could sometimes hide cruelty. He had built his power carefully, wrapping it in humor and warmth, but when that humor turned against her, she felt trapped. To speak out risked everything: her reputation, her career, and the show's image. And so she kept her silence. She laughed when the cameras rolled, smiled for the press, and thanked audiences for their love. To the world, she was still the patient mother who embodied grace. But inside, the woman behind that character was breaking. Even in private, Karen rarely spoke about what was happening. She confided in a few close friends but never sought revenge or publicity. Her upbringing had taught her to endure, to preserve harmony even when it hurt. Yet with each passing season, the emotional weight grew heavier. The man she once trusted now felt unreachable, his charisma a mask that hid something she could no longer understand. When the cast gathered for photo shoots or public events, Karen played her part. She smiled next to Landon, stood by his side, and watched him charm interviewers with stories of family values. But behind those photographs were unspoken words, years of quiet resentment and disappointment. By the time the series neared its final years, Grassle knew the distance between them could never be repaired. Still, she stayed professional until the end. The audience never saw the cracks forming behind that perfect family portrait. And when the cameras finally stopped, she walked away without a word. It was easier to let the world believe the story they loved than to reveal the one that nearly broke her. By the late 1970s, the cracks that had quietly formed between Karen Grassle and Michael Landon were no longer invisible. The on-set tension had become something everyone could feel, even if few dared to name it. What began as subtle discomfort had turned into a growing emotional distance. Grassle often arrived on set early, ready to work, rehearsing her lines with the same dedication she had from the beginning. But the atmosphere had changed. Landon's laughter no longer filled the air the way it once had. Scenes that used to be easy and collaborative now felt controlled, sometimes even hostile. He had grown impatient, snapping at crew members, making offhand remarks that left Karen feeling diminished. It wasn't one explosive argument that broke her spirit. It was the accumulation, the jokes that cut too close, the dismissive tone when she offered an idea, the quiet reminders that he alone called the shots. To the outside world, Landon still seemed flawless. But for Karen, each day became a test of endurance. During one rehearsal, she tried to suggest a small change in dialogue, something that made Caroline sound more authentic to the moment. Landon brushed her off with a smile that wasn't kind. The cast laughed, assuming it was harmless teasing. She smiled too, pretending it didn't sting. But that night, she sat alone in her trailer, realizing something had shifted for good. She had given her heart to the show. Every emotion, every tear, every gentle word she delivered as Caroline Ingalls had come from a real place within her. And now, that sincerity was being met with indifference. Landon's creative control had become a wall she couldn't climb. For years, she had defended him to others, telling herself he was simply under pressure, misunderstood, or burdened by success. But as his behavior grew harder to excuse, she began to feel the isolation set in. Some cast members noticed the tension, but no one intervened. After all, Landon was both the star and the boss. The breaking point wasn't about ego or money anymore, it was about dignity. Karen knew she couldn't continue working in an environment where her contributions were quietly dismissed. Her scenes still radiated warmth on camera, but behind them was an actress fighting to keep her composure. Eventually, the emotional toll became too heavy. The respect that once anchored their partnership was gone. Landon, who had once spoken of family and fairness, now seemed consumed by control and pride. Karen stopped expecting kindness and focused instead on survival, finishing her work with professionalism and grace. When the show entered its later seasons, her appearances grew less frequent. Some fans noticed, most didn't. To them, Little House was still the same comforting world it had always been. But to Karen, it had become a place of quiet heartbreak. As production neared its end, she faced a choice: stay silent and preserve the illusion, or speak and risk everything. She chose silence, not because she was afraid, but because she knew that anything she said would be twisted or ignored. She had seen how Landon controlled the narrative. He shaped how people remembered things. And she wasn't ready to fight a battle she knew she couldn't win. When the series finally wrapped, she walked away with a heavy heart. She left behind the role that made her famous and the man who had both inspired and wounded her. What she carried instead was something far deeper, a quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest strength is found in restraint. Her silence would last decades. And as the world continued to celebrate Michael Landon's legacy, Karen Grassle became a ghost in her own story, watching from afar as the truth she had lived remained untold. When Little House on the Prairie ended in 1982, it was more than the close of a beloved television era. For Karen Grassle, it was the quiet collapse of something she once believed in. The prairie that had symbolized warmth and unity now felt like a memory she could barely touch without pain. She had poured nearly a decade of her life into that world, yet when the lights dimmed and the set was struck, there was no farewell party for her, no public gratitude from the man she had helped make legendary. She left quietly, as she had lived those final years, unheard, unacknowledged, but not defeated. Hollywood moved on quickly. Landon launched new projects, and his image as America's perfect father only grew stronger. Karen, meanwhile, tried to start over. She returned to the stage, taking roles in small productions and rebuilding her confidence piece by piece. But the shadow of Little House followed her everywhere. Every interview, every fan encounter, eventually circled back to Michael Landon. To speak truthfully felt dangerous. To stay silent felt dishonest. So she did what she had always done. She took the higher road. Decades passed. Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1991, and news of his illness reached her like a cold wind. For all the pain he had caused, she couldn't bring herself to hate him. The memories were too intertwined. His laughter, his drive, the countless hours they had spent crafting stories that shaped a generation. When he died that July, the world mourned a hero. Karen grieved in private, her emotions tangled between sorrow and unfinished forgiveness. Years later, she would admit that his passing left her with questions she could never ask. Would he have understood how deeply he hurt her? Would he have apologized if given the chance? Or had he long forgotten the weight of what happened between them? She would never know. What she did know was that silence had protected her once, but now it kept her trapped in a story she no longer recognized. During those years away from the spotlight, Karen found a different kind of strength. She focused on the theater again, taught acting and built a quieter life rooted in self-respect. She no longer needed validation from the industry that had once overlooked her. Yet, the ghost of Little House never faded. Every rerun, every anniversary special, every nostalgic tribute brought the past back like a song she couldn't stop hearing. Still, she said nothing. Even when others spoke glowingly of Landon, she resisted bitterness. Her silence was not born of fear anymore, but of compassion. She believed in letting the dead rest, in preserving the good even when the truth was painful. But inside her, a storm remained. The version of events told by the media, of a happy, harmonious set and a flawless leading man, wasn't the one she had lived. It took decades for that quiet unrest to turn into courage. When she began writing her memoir, she knew what it would cost. She also knew she couldn't tell her own story without finally telling the truth about him. It wasn't revenge she sought. It was balance, the kind that comes from acknowledging both light and shadow. Her reflections were not filled with venom or accusation. They were steeped in empathy, in the recognition that Landon, for all his faults, was human. She admitted he was brilliant and charismatic, but also flawed and deeply insecure. And in saying that, she freed herself. By the time her words reached the public, nearly 40 years had passed. But for Karen Grassle, the silence had lasted long enough. When Karen Grassle finally broke her silence, the world listened. Nearly 50 years had passed since the first episode of Little House on the Prairie, and the memories she had once locked away were no longer a burden she could carry alone. The woman audiences had known as the gentle, steadfast Ma finally spoke in her own voice, measured, reflective, and unflinchingly honest. Her revelations came through her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, published in 2021. The book wasn't written to tear anyone down, it was written to set her free. In its pages, she described the complicated truth behind the show's perfection, the power imbalance, the dismissive jokes, the quiet humiliation she endured while portraying America's favorite mother. She made it clear that she respected Michael Landon's talent, but could no longer protect his image at the cost of her own truth. For decades, fans had worshipped the legend of Landon, the kind father, the moral compass of television. What Grassle revealed didn't destroy that legacy, but it did humanize it. She explained how his humor could sometimes cut like a knife, how his moods changed with the pressure of production, and how his need for control left little room for vulnerability. She didn't speak with anger, only with the clarity that comes from years of reflection. Readers were stunned. Some found it difficult to reconcile their beloved Pay Ingalls with the man described in her memories. Others thanked her for the honesty, for daring to share the parts of a story that history had edited out. Karen herself described feeling relief for the first time in decades. She hadn't wanted to tarnish anyone's reputation. She simply wanted to tell her truth before time ran out. Her words carried a grace that only age and forgiveness can bring. She spoke of Landon's brilliance, his ability to make everyone on set feel like they were part of something meaningful. But she also spoke of how that brilliance sometimes darkened into arrogance, and how she, a young woman trying to survive in a male-dominated industry, learned to swallow her voice to keep the peace. In interviews following the book's release, Grassle made it clear that she no longer carried bitterness. "I'm proud of what we did," she said simply. "But it's important to tell the truth. It was a statement of peace, not confrontation, a reflection of a woman who had lived long enough to understand that truth and kindness can coexist." What made her confession so powerful wasn't just what she revealed, it was how she revealed it. There was no sensationalism, no attempt to rewrite history. Instead, there was a quiet dignity in her words, a sense that she had waited this long not out of fear but out of respect. She had wanted to make sure that when she finally spoke, her heart was ready. The world responded with empathy. Fans flooded social media and message boards with support, calling her brave for speaking her truth so late in life. Some even said it deepened their love for Little House, because it reminded them that behind every story of perfection lies real human struggle. The series, they said, now meant something more. For Karen, it wasn't just about the show. It was about reclaiming herself. After years of being defined by one role, she finally stepped out from behind the shadow of Michael and became Karen Grassle again, actress, survivor, and truth-teller. Her courage to speak at 82 became its own kind of inspiration. And perhaps most moving of all was the way she chose to remember Landon. Despite the hurt, she never erased his impact. She acknowledged his pain, his creative brilliance, and his humanity. Her story was not an accusation, but an act of forgiveness. In the end, what she revealed didn't shatter the image of Little House on the Prairie, it completed it. The warmth fans had always felt for the Ingalls family now carried new meaning, because the truth behind it was finally known. For Karen Grassle, the silence that once protected her had finally served its purpose. By speaking, she didn't destroy the legend, she made it real. In the end, Karen Grassle's story is not one of bitterness, it is one of release. For nearly 50 years, she carried the weight of silence, protecting the memory of a man the world adored while quietly healing from the pain he caused. Yet when she finally spoke, she did so with compassion, not vengeance. She gave fans a fuller truth, that greatness and flaw can live in the same person, and that forgiveness can take a lifetime to find. Her honesty did not erase Michael Landon's legacy, it expanded it. It reminded the world that even the most perfect family on television was built by imperfect human beings, struggling, learning, and loving in their own ways. Today, when viewers watch Little House on the Prairie, they see more than nostalgia. They see two artists whose complicated bond created something timeless, and they understand that silence, once broken, can become its own kind of peace. For more emotional stories, check out this video.